Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, we will be discussing the issues and the trials and tribulations that the F&B industry is going through with, one of the first things I should begin before I introduce my panelists as well is that we had a fourth panelist, Manu Chandra from Sauce.vc. He is unable to join us because of some personal crisis that he's dealing with, unfortunately. And these are the times we live in. So yes, coming back to the panelists that we have with us right now, we have Manu Chandra, the chef. He's also the head of the NRI Bangalore chapter. He's the chef partner for Monkey Bar, Toast Tonic, Fatty Bao. I don't think the man needs any introduction. Thank you so much for having us, being with us here, chef. Then we have Kartik, who's the president of InBev India and South Asia. And, Kartik has, he brings with him over 15 years of experience in marketing, sales, and business development. In fact, he was one of the first people to join the team when InBev was setting their team in India. And then we have Nitin. Good afternoon, Nitin. He's the CEO and founder of Chaayos. His love for chai led him to find one of the biggest chai startups in India. He invests his time in product, customer experience, technology, and innovations. And after a short 5-year stint in New York, he came back and now he's here with us and making us all have, great tea. I'm Shabori. I'm a senior writer with ET Prime. For those of us, I'm pretty sure all of us here are aware of what ET Prime does, but a short, succinct description would be, we are the paywall section of Economic Times, and this talk is a part of a series of talks that we do called PrimeTalk, and we are trying to answer questions in a detailed manner so that we can, in some capacity, help the industry and maybe, make some changes as well. To start off, we all are aware of the dire circumstances that the industry is in right now. In fact, according to IBEF, the entire industry is supposed to be nearly 3,75,000 crores in size, which contributes to almost 3% of the GDP. And the numbers that I'm quoting is for 2020. And the estimations are that there will be losses of $9 billion. And to say that in Indian currency, that would be 67,000 crores, nearly. And according to NRAI, we have nearly 7 million people employed with the industry. And needless to say, the need of the hour is that we need to do something, because the industry that gives us so much joy and happiness is slowly dying a very painful death. So before I start, I would love to have some introductory comments from the panelists, and then we can jump right into the meat of the discussion. And let's start with the chef.
Thank you for having me. And I will try to balance out both the Manu Chandra as one who's missing now, because he was supposed to present the positive aspects of things. But yes, you did mention the size of the industry. It is a mammoth industry, and I'm glad you're referring it to an industry. I wish, the people in power also paid due cognizance and started recognizing us as a bona fide industry, which not only contributes a fair amount to the GDP, but also is one of the largest employers of human capital in the country. And I think that's really where a lot of the problems stem from, and why we are often left in the lurch. It's because, when there is no recognition, which is required as an industry, it becomes a pillar to post run for us all the time. And how many doors are you going to knock on to make sure that your angst or your issues are being attended to? It varies. The center has its own agendas, the states operate on their own levels, and all of this, the people who get beaten down are essentially a lot of small business owners like us, who just don't know which way to look. And protection obviously then becomes, the salvaging of any kind of situation becomes that much harder. So yes, I mean, the pandemic year has been a disastrous one. And I mean, there's untold horrors as far as numbers are concerned, as far as closures are concerned, as far as people losing their entire, investment and savings are concerned. The number of shutters that went down are astounding. How do you climb out of something like that? I mean, the only way to climb out of a situation as dire as that is when the government steps in to support you, when the banks step in to support you, and when the entire ecosystem supports you. And as I say often, that this is a situation where the pain needs to be borne by everyone equally, because that's really the only way to come out of this in any way. If you're going to be left with a situation where 5 agencies say that no, we want everything in its entirety, irrespective of whether you were closed or not, the inability to invoke force majeure, because this was essentially an act of God, quote unquote, none of that became applicable to us. In fact, there's, I think, only one stray Madras High Court order which instructed a singular agency to treat the last year's lockdown as a force majeure event and not charge a renewal fee. That, unfortunately, has not happened across the country. Then there's, of course, the war with the landlords, and it goes on and on. So, I mean, my list can go on forever, but I think synopsizing it, that is the largest issue. If we're not going to get the due recognition, and if people aren't going to wake up and smell the chai, we're always going to be in this sort of predicament.
Okay. That's a lot. And let's hope that in the next 1.5 hours, we are able to at least touch upon some of the aspects of it. Nitin, your entire business, please correct me if I'm wrong, is office goer stopping by, having a cup of chai, and all of that hasn't been around for almost a year. So,
So yes, you're right, Shabori. A reasonable chunk of our revenue comes from business parks and business districts, as we call them. Yeah. And yes, that part of business has been wiped out. Having said that, it only contributes about 25% of our overall business. And the rest 75% comes from, let's say, high streets or malls or airports and things like that. Needless to say, not that they are not impacted, they are also severely impacted. While business parks are shut, all the other formats are operating at a much reduced occupancy, which is directly leading to much reduced revenues per square feet on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
When you said that, oh, that's a long list that Manu just put up in front of us. Actually, that's what the reality of the situation is. While we as an industry at 4.2 lakh annual crores, 4.2 lakh crores annual turnover as an industry, we should ideally need no recognition. The unfortunate part is that being labeled as discretionary spend and non-essential spend, that just leads to a lot of ill thought out, passing the buck kind of behavior from different governments. That, oh, you've got to just demonstrate that something's happening at the government's end. Okay, let's go out and put these restrictions on this on this restaurant business, which is any which way is discretionary. I think what would have been way more pragmatic of the government would have been to be able to just continuously reinforcing the same guidelines that FSSAI came out with last year, that the Ministry of Health and Welfare came out with last year. Just keep reinforcing those same guidelines and make sure that the restaurants operate within those guidelines and leave the rest of the decision making to the consumer. The consumer is super educated. The consumer needs just no education at all. So just singling out a particular industry and putting all the burden on the small business owners without the operating word is without taking any ownership on the government's end as to how to compensate for those small business owners. I think that's a fairly myopic view, because if an industry as large as food and beverage, as large as a restaurant industry, if that were to even get a a small jolt that will actually lead to a movement in GDP numbers overall. And out here, we are just taking blows after blows. Imagine how that contributes directly into the GDP for the economy itself. So I think what is needed is more of pragmatism in making sure that the citizens of the country are safe.
Yeah.
I can speak on behalf of National Restaurant Association of India, NRAI, that restaurateurs are more than willing to just take all the responsibilities that they will have to live by, and the rules and regulations that they will need to adhere to. In fact, last year when Ministry of Health and Welfare was thinking of coming out with guidelines, they reached out to NRAI to be able to help them with drafting those guidelines, and we are more than happy to just live by them. So yeah, a lot more pragmatism is needed, and not just show.
Okay. Next up, we have Kartik. Welcome, Kartik. I'm, you're one of the only voices for the alcohol industry here. We would love to hear how the industry has been. I understand, from brief conversations that you and I have had, that beer's recovery was not as well as your hard spirits, which was, which is expected. But where do we stand right now? How are things after a year of the pandemic so far, and now that we are into, at least Bangalore is into its second lockdown again, and the whole country is dealing with the second wave. Over to you, Kartik.
Yeah, we just thought we were barely getting out till a month ago. I think there were signs, some green shoots that normalcy was returning, and of course the second surge has hit us like a bolt out of the blue. And as a consequence, we seem to have gone back to square number one as far as any sort of recovery expectation that we were harboring not too long ago. That said, and just hearing Manu and Nitin talk about some of the challenges they're seeing in their respective businesses, it's remarkable how similar our situation is. Not exactly the same exact operating businesses, but similar realities. It's got to do with the continuity of our businesses. These are not businesses that you switch on the light and switch it off every now and then. You require some continuity to be able to get momentum back. I know in the case of the hospitality industry, it's about getting your staff back. It's about getting a certain level of rhythm back, not very different with a manufacturing operation like ourselves. We just happen to have a very large kitchen. We happen to make similar type of products as opposed to the diverse cuisines that are made at their establishments. But the fundamentals are not that different. You need continuity, and starting and stopping is not that easy as sometimes it's made out to be, which is why I suppose the guidelines that both of them were referring to, they were the right ones. We've seen firsthand around Q4 of the calendar year of last year, October, November, December, to the point Nitin was making, people have been fairly responsible. I myself, every time I ventured out, the safety standards that various kinds of bars and restaurants have laid out, hotels as well. At times you felt safer there than you felt in your own home because of the considerations that were factored in. And they weren't going away. In fact, people were adjusting to it, right? The lack of the physical menu card in your hand, the distancing that was maintained in a lot of these establishments. So I do feel the pain that was coming through the voices of both Nitin and Manu, that it's not a very easy environment in which to operate in. That said, the one silver lining, I think, through the course of the first wave coming into this one was how quickly, and that's maybe the only silver lining here for the future, for us all to be hopeful, otherwise it's very easy to get very discouraged very soon, is the consumer sentiment and confidence to come back and re-engage with people, come together with others in restaurants and bars over a nice meal, having a nice drink together, I think was fairly positive. And with everything the government has just announced with lowering of the age group for vaccinations, I think it augurs well that people this time would come with even greater confidence, because now they feel they're a little more bulletproof than they were maybe last time around, because the vaccination, I think, will do a great deal of good for confidence. And we see it the world over in about 160 countries in which we operate. everywhere, and Australia is a great example, everywhere where we see COVID cases coming down to a certain threshold, the first industry that sees the sharpest recovery is the F&B industry. People come back in droves because that's the place, as you said in your opening remarks, that brings happiness to people, right? Because it offers a platform for people to come together. I think those are the things that we're clutching on. I know it's clutching on straws at the moment, but those are the things we're clutching on. We can almost predict by looking at some of the other countries what may play out here. At the same time, I think what would be needed over the next 6 to 12 months is a lot of love, care, and attention from the side of the government as well, by giving more flexibility than they have in the past. I think the point Manu was making around licenses, giving flexibility around some level of breaks over the next maybe 1 or 2 cycles of taxes for giving some support for people to be able to have a chance to recover back a lot of the significant losses that have been undertaken over the last 12 months. So I'd say it's a mixed bag, very easy to get dejected at the moment, but at the same time, there's hope when you think about vaccination being the one silver bullet we have, not to mention the sentiment that consumers finally would want to come back. This is not a natural state of being as humans, and we just have to have a more amiable environment for all of this to sort of finally come back to a sense of.
Thank you so much. That is a lot of food for thought as well. All of us are understanding, or rather, we are extremely cognizant of the fact that the underlying issue is that the industry is suffering. All three of you are representing different aspects of the industry, but yet all of us have the same sentiment that the industry is suffering. So one of the things that I wanted to, touch upon was, for Manu, for Chef, and Nitin, your entire business, and especially for the Chef, your entire business, please correct me if I'm wrong, I read this somewhere, almost 70% of fine dining business is based on the walk-ins and the in-dining experience. Nitin, same goes for you as well. Chai is such a, it's almost like it's available everywhere, right? So most of us are drinking at home, and I know I used to order from you guys or walk into a Chaayos, and now we're not doing that anymore. So even your walk-in, numbers are quite, your business is driven by the walk-in numbers. And Karthik, for you, the Horeca sales or the on-trade sales is, I understand, is a smaller percentage of your business as opposed to the off-trade. However, beer is not something which is very, Indians don't have a second freezer at home. We don't have a lot of space in our refrigerators to stock a lot of beer, even if we want to. So it's not the same as spirits. So if all of you could, share a little bit of your thoughts on the primary issue that we are dealing with, that there's a complete washout of a certain section of the population, which would drive your sales on a regular basis. And what are the, if this is the challenge, how have you guys been dealing with it over the last few months since the unlocking happened up until the second wave so far? Over to you guys.
Sure. So maybe I'll go first. When the first lockdown was announced, of course, all the dine-in transactions, they went down to zero because it was an official lockdown. And the moment lockdown restrictions were being eased out, and the moment the new restaurant dining operating guidelines were out, restaurants were prepared to welcome back guests with those new guidelines. And if you were to look at the months of December 2020 or January 2021, the response from the consumers was that led by confidence. The consumers were very clear that, okay, I trust these many number of brands. I can trust them to follow those guidelines, and it was clearly evident in the number of walk-ins. I can speak for ourselves. We in the month of January, we saw nearly 86% recovery in our dine-in revenues, led by consumer confidence. And now, once again, given the state of official lockdown in different cities, it's different for each and every state. It is again pretty much down to zero. just reiterating my previous point, normalcy was never restored, but with the new operating guidelines, the consumer confidence was clearly evident. The consumer was making their choices pragmatically that, okay, I would trust A, B, C, D, E brands. I would be very comfortable walking into those brands, and that's what they're demonstrating. So I think the proof is out there as to what the consumers are looking for. The consumers are looking for a safe environment, and they should just be free to make their choices.
Chef?
Yeah, well, as Nitin's already mentioned that, when the lockdown came in, it was basically a full stop. It immediately everything went to zero. What's really important to understand is that, a lot of people have a tendency to think, I remember even growing up, my aunt used to say, oh, this restaurant business is very good, 3,000% profit people make. Huh? I mean, they just presumed that everything was marked up because something from a restaurant was more expensive than what you would make at home. And this was an old school of thought where you would basically do, sabzi itne ki aati hai, tel itne ka aata hai, vagera, and then when you put it together, it's only that much. Of course, when you join the restaurant business, you realize, it's slim pickings. You work on very, very small margins. And depending on which state you're in, depending on how many license fees you have to fill, etc., depending on what square footage rental you have to pay, depending on how high HR cost is, all of this basically adds up. Now, when you add slim pickings, and on top of that, you're working on something called a deferred payment model, which is really how restaurants work, is you buy something today, then you sell it tomorrow, you buy it on credit, and as you sell it, you start servicing that credit, right? So you are almost always in debt. And this is something that most people don't understand, that it is a deferred payment or deferred debt model. When you're in a situation like that, and there is a complete stoppage of any kind of revenue coming in, you essentially are continuing to culminate a certain level of expenses. And let me explain this because a lot of people don't have, tend not to understand this, that if I have an experiential restaurant, for example, which is of a certain size in a certain city, I need to keep the electricity on because there's refrigeration over there. There is other services over there. There can be fire hazards for which you need the electricity to constantly be on. This is not an expense that stops, right? It's a rolling expense that you're incurring without having to earn a penny of revenue. So when you come out of a lockdown and consumer confidence starts going up, as Nitin mentioned, and of course the last quarter was a healthy one for the industry at large, but we were still just servicing all those old debts, be it vendor payments, etc., everything that got stuck in the pipeline. Yeah. So we're emerging from it today. I mean, now, of course, there's a new lockdown that's come into effect since yesterday in Karnataka, but we just about started fulfilling all the old commitments, and we've gone into lockdown again. Dine in for a lot of us does constitute a chunk of our revenues. And when I say chunk, it can be as high as 90-95%. Not every restaurant is built on a delivery model. And at that level, of course, the fear is that, you can try to step into the delivery paradigm, but it's not something that you're accustomed to. So, I mean, I like anecdotal stuff, and I like, substantiating it with examples. Currently, I'm sitting in a restaurant where I've had to create a menu specifically for delivery, even though it's a fine dining restaurant. And I've pivoted the entire idea around things that I like to eat. So at least I have some traction with my loyalists. Otherwise, the sort of food that I do over here in a high-end fine dining restaurant doesn't necessarily translate effectively into a delivery model. So I have no ways of being able to keep my people gainfully employed. Because how does one continue to pay salaries of that, which could be as high as 25-30% of your turnover on good months? How do you service that when you have no revenue coming in? Yeah. So adjustments become so important. And how far will you adjust? You see, delivery is not this low-hanging fruit for everybody. It is. I know it's a large market, and of course we have aggregators today who are going IPO and basically making a lot of money. It's thanks to us, as far as the vendors are concerned, who have basically propelled them into these spaces of where they're practically as big as tech companies. But they are tech companies for all practical purposes. They're not food companies. But not everyone can adjust to that formula. So what happens to them? Do they just fall by the wayside? Do they just pull the shutters down and say, sorry, we just cannot be operable anymore? That's sort of inevitability that you're faced with. Every time that this will happen, and we're seeing that the second wave is just it's heart-wrenching. It's so brutal. It's so brutal that there is no saying. Projections say something else, which are also very scary. When you come out of this, and when you come out of it, what's the guarantee that something like this will not repeat itself? At least in this calendar year, there is none. It's all conjecture. How do you brace yourself for that then? You can only brace yourself by consolidating as much as you possibly can. And consolidation is unfortunately a very painstaking exercise as far as an entrepreneur is concerned, because you've built so much, you've built so many loyalties, you built your people, and you reach a point where you realize that you cannot carry everybody on your shoulders because it's not tenable from an economic point of view.
Yeah.
So, that's I think one thing that everyone does have to understand, that it is going to impact employment in a substantial fashion. And even when the last unlock happened, which was around September for me at least, for some places opened a little earlier, some places opened a little later, a lot of people started operating on very heavily consolidated cost structures. So we realized that the only way to be able to get out of that mess was to make sure that you were being able to bring in a certain level of revenue, but at much, much lower cost head.
Yeah.
What do you do after the second one? It's really hard to predict.
Yeah. I can totally imagine. Kartik, I understand that, AB InBev had a, whole different trajectory. Like you guys slashed prices of Corona and Hogarden as well in the middle. At the time when people drink beer, this is when people would like to, take a break from a Wednesday afternoon, and go and, grab a beer with their friends in the middle of the week and just, you don't want to get drunk, but, and that entire thing is washed out. And, it's not like people don't want to drink. They are drinking. It's just that beer, as I mentioned earlier, it's a stocking issue at home, right? So how has the curve been for you guys? I understand, like you mentioned earlier when we spoke, that hard liquor and spirits had a sharp curve, sort of a recovery, and you guys just about started to see that, and it got stunted. So if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, in part also because of, I think there's a little bit of an echo at my end, in part also because of discriminatory taxation as far as COVID cesses were concerned between spirits and beer, which is always remarkable for me when I think about a country like India with demographic advantage, not to mention our climate, that the government almost unintentionally ends up promoting harder forms of alcohol just by way of how taxes are laid out, which is one of the reasons why India has the lowest penetration of beer versus any other country on the planet, by the way, which is also the reason we have the lowest per capita consumption of a more moderate beverage for a country as young as ours. That said, when you think about the challenges of what we call the on-trade, which happens to be our friends here, our partners in the trade, who have these experiential venues, bars, restaurants, hotels, where people actually end up experimenting and discovering for the first time certain products by way of new introductions. It's a very important channel for new product discovery, for experimentation. And in the absence of that, you actually see the alcobev category become very transactional. It's almost like you use your soul, right? The on-trade is where truly our products have a role. They're used, I think, for a variety of purposes, but we can all agree they have a far more intuitive role there than maybe when we think about in-home consumption. That does not always tend to have that very social aspect to it, because it could also be just an individual enjoying a beer by himself or herself. And so we had to pivot towards a reality for the better part of July, August, September, right up till October, when we were starting to see the out-of-home venues open up. There was obviously a great deal we had to deal with, also by way of perception, because for a lot of people, doctors' recommendation themselves, having cold beverages, etc., could create a situation where, individuals would be more prone towards COVID. States like Telangana, for example, which represent a third of all beer sold in India, the industry is still at about half of the size it was in 2019. It just hasn't recovered, right? A combination of taxes, a combination of local rumors and perceptions, and an inclination that the industry also has more towards the on-trade. Suddenly the on-trade goes away, the industry doesn't quite recover as quickly. India's situation also is sort of compounded by the idea that we live in joint families. People are a little more comfortable when they're here in Bangalore working, or in Hyderabad. Now that IT companies have asked them to work from home, they've gone back to their towns, but there they have parents at home, so they're not going to sit and drink in front of their parents. So you've got all of these challenges that, in addition to what you spoke of, which is also stocking, that we saw every time there was a small unlock, when a particular micro lockdown was lifted, people tended to stock bottles and bottles of whiskey and vodka and rum. It's just also more convenient, right? A bottle of whiskey probably suffices a month's worth of consumption for somebody. Equivalent of that would be 2 cases of beer, which also is inconvenient just from a shopping standpoint. That said, we could look back and pontificate a lot about what happened. What we're doing is pivoting very quickly and also trying to see how these new consumer behaviors can be tapped into, can be responded to, but without losing any belief in fundamentals that I spoke about in my opening remarks. We don't see in any way, and there's proof of that in other countries, that the on-trade, the restaurants, the HoReCa channel, as you put it, is going to lose its relevance, or may not necessarily have the same level of consumer affinity as far as the role that particular channel plays. I think, in fact, it's only going to, in our view, get stronger and stronger. There would be a period that I think there would have to be a remarkable level of collaboration, cooperation, and support provided to this very important industry. As I'm hearing some of the examples right now as well, the consolidation aspects that are being spoken of. It's not easy when there's so much unpredictability and volatility, but there's no reason for us to believe, absolutely none, that we're not going to emerge. It's a matter of when, not if. When we emerge from this, there's no reason for us to believe that this industry is not going to get even more stronger. Because as we're sort of going through the first phase and the second surge in this case, there's a great deal that we are building on from the previous surge. Here I'm talking about consumers, not us in the business. And that is, they're becoming more wiser. I think, as Nitin said, first round people were already wise. Now they're even more wiser. At the same time, the trade's responding by elevating their protocols. So we stay, fairly hopeful. I say that being mindful of the fact that it almost oversimplifies the challenges that entrepreneurs like the kind Nitin and Manu represent are facing. So I don't want to oversimplify the situation to the point where it seems like we're almost wading through a period and we'll just emerge. I think it'll require a great deal of support for people to indeed recover, then have a period where opportunities would have to be rediscovered. And eventually, whether that's 10 months from now or 18 months from now, there's no reason for us to believe that we won't get back to the levels of normalcy we have. And India is not a pariah that way. If it's happening in other parts of the world, those same factors are going to play out here. I almost get a sense they'll play out here better because we just have certain advantages that will play to our end. So long story short, I think for us, we're not going to pivot our entire business towards the off-trade and in-home consumption, because for us, this is just a momentary passing phase. Fundamentally for us, Alcobev as a business is grounded in the idea of coming together in experiences. We feel this business is best bought alive in the on-trade, and that happens to be the case in the US, in the UK, in many other countries. The on-trade represents 90% of the business. In India, it's the other way around, but we do believe we'll get there at some point in the future.
Thank you so much for that, Kartik. Actually, that was really interesting. So we've touched upon the challenges a little bit. Obviously, there's you can never have enough time to talk about the challenges, but I did want to touch upon a certain thing about, and it will slightly be a different question for Kartik and for the chef and Nitin, is that the restaurant business is different, right? You guys have variable costs and have fixed costs, and something that I've been hearing a lot since I even started working on this is that you have to cut back on the costs. That's the only way to survive, and I think that's like a given. But if you could both share small tweaks that you guys have done to your business model to survive the last 6 months. And Kartik, for you, I understand that you guys have a very different unit economics to begin with. But in terms of, like you said, you're not pivoting your entire business model towards off trade, but a small percentage of less than 20%, even if that's the case with Horeca sales that is not coming in or not coming in to the extent that you would like to. What are the small business tweaks that you guys have done? And are these tweaks here to stay? Are they part of the industry now? Or are these just contingent, makeup situation that we are doing right now to put a Band-Aid over the situation and we'll go back to operating the way we used to pre-pandemic? Or these are part of the industry now? Let's start with Nitin.
Sure. So Shabori, as you would have, I'm sure, reported on several occasions in last 12 months, you would have certainly heard it from a lot of us. The biggest component where a lot of time and energy went in last 12 months is to be able to talk to our landlords and be able to get the overall rentals, the rupee value of rentals down by as much as possible, right? That's the biggest fixed cost, at least for us.
Was there any states where it was particularly difficult for you guys to, face this challenge?
So I would say that we operate in the state of UP, Delhi, Haryana, Karnataka, Maharashtra, and the Union Territory of Chandigarh. I think what was great was that we received support from majority of landlords. Let me put a number to it. We received support from over 90% of our landlords, where they were willing to waive off their rentals for a significant period of time. They were willing to get a much smaller chunk of the contracted rental for another period of time.
And this was, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but was this on a case-to-case basis, or was it like a?
It was all a case-to-case basis. So we run 95 stores. So it was 95 different conversations that were going on.
Wow.
And so is the order of magnitude for as big your business is, and that's the biggest cost. That was to be brought down. Otherwise, a lot of players would have just bled to death. And thankfully, a lot of mall developers, individual landlords, business park developers, they kind of understood that it is important when there are no transactions being conducted or very little transactions being conducted, that these rental discounts be passed on to the brand owners. So that was one of the biggest costs, but to answer your question, most of them were temporary in nature, right?
Okay.
All those conversations have kicked off once again, and it's not easy to conduct all those conversations. They are difficult, sticky, time-taking conversations for anybody. No matter you have to do one conversation or you have to do 1,000 of them for larger brands. So that's something that's now being worked upon once again. Some of the other cost structures that have kind of permanently changed is your overall cost of management, the overall investment on marketing, the overall investment on headquarter costs, the overall investment in store management. Like you have area managers, you have general managers that control a big pyramid of stores. So there have been a lot of permanent changes that have been done there as well.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nitin. Chef, I remember you mentioning that we are paying the price of our own growth that the F&B industry saw in the last decade, and now that the numbers are ridiculous to work with in the midst of this kind of a pandemic, the rentals have been a big problem for you guys as well. So, if we talk about the fixed costs, and obviously the variable cost keeps changing, but, what kind of changes can we expect in fine dining and, that entire section of business?
Well, I mean, Nitin did mention some of it already. It's basically I'm gonna spin off from that, which is and the point that I made previously about consolidation. Consolidation also basically is largely creeps into your fixed costs, and how do you control those? So or reduce them substantially, and that's really the endeavor that as a company we took right after. I mean, during the entire lockdown last year, because we had to find ways and means of making this work long term.
Okay.
HO costs coming down, uh, uh, rationalization of the HR costs,
Mhm.
technological intervention to aid in that.
Yeah.
And you suddenly saw from both a safety point of view and also from, of course, a people point of view. We, as a country, we've always had. Why do people think? Why do you think that people across the world always say, "Oh, hospitality in Asia is always so much better"? Is because there's just so many people, around you all the time, around your table all the time. How is this? How is that? Four people bringing stuff to your table. It's crazy, three people to man the gate. Uh, that has all changed, and that will probably be a long-term change. Now you sit
Okay.
down and you scan a QR code, and your menu comes up. Even in a fine dining restaurant, you don't need one person to give you the menu, one person to pour
Yeah.
the water, one person to take the order, one person to come and put the food down. So in many ways, we're probably adapting more to a European model, where one person essentially does three or four different tasks,
Okay.
which, I mean, I'm a bit of a taskmaster, so I'm very happy to see that there's that many efficiencies that are being built in.
Yeah.
But overall, from a macro picture, you also have to understand that there's always a downside of it. And I mean, of course, I am an entrepreneur, I am a businessman, I am a chef, but I can't take the morality away from it, because somebody is going to be at the receiving end of this consolidation.
Yeah.
Somebody is, unfortunately, invariably not going to have an employment anymore.
Yeah.
And where do they go?
Yeah.
So when one of the largest uh, employers of human capital in the country start consolidating and tightening their belts, there will be a lot of young people out in the
Yeah.
market. Where do they go? There is far-reaching effects of this. And tying into the very first point that was made, that had there been some proactive steps, had there
Yeah.
been something positive forthcoming towards us, a situation like this would not have arisen. And it really needs a deep dive,
Yeah.
from maybe an investigative journalism point of view, but it does impact employment to a very large extent, and it's
Yeah. Of course.
unfortunate because we wouldn't want that to happen, but we have no choice.
Yeah. Makes sense. Karthik, you have a completely, I'm assuming you'll be having a different opinion about the whole thing, but what are the changes in, and AB InBev is like, it's the largest brewer of the world. So the changes, I mean, to start with, whatever the changes are, did you guys have changes on a geography to geography basis, or was were there any global changes that were, uh, replicated across all the geographies as well? Like, how does a big brewery such as AB and Bev, what kind of changes have you guys incorporated, and what is here to stay, most importantly?
So India was hands down one of the more significantly impacted countries from within the AB and Bev network.
Okay.
And as a consequence, I think it gave us an opportunity to recognize newer ways of operating in India. It's almost like you could write a set of new principles every year about what it would take to succeed out here. We recognized a few more. First amongst them was, of course, access and greater control over supply chains is crucial. One of the reasons we decided to localize Corona and Hugaran, which is why the price could become that much more accessible, because we weren't applying 140% import duty, not because those brands needed price repositioning. Very expensive to produce. It's just that we could offer a fairer reflection of what those prices could look like once we removed the import duties out of it. But localizing the supply chain for products like those, I'm glad we did that, because if it was not COVID, it was the Suez Canal getting blocked. So the world we're emerging into, I think we need greater control, because that's one less variable that is out of your control at a time where so many other things don't seem to be as predictable as you would like them to be. The other is, we've also found this to be a good opportunity to revisit the choices of markets we'd like to operate in within the country, because there are some geographies that offer, I think, greater predictability of doing business, because you don't have to almost keep your fingers crossed every year at a time that a new policy is being allowed. As you know, alcohol is a state subject. It's not part of
Yes.
GST. States every year announce a new set of policies, and you're almost, chewing your fingernails out, hoping against hope that it's not very dramatic. Sometimes it's amazing, like has been evidenced in the case of West Bengal. You see a direct impact of that on the industry exploding, particularly in the favor of beer. In other cases, you have less than positive changes made that almost contract the industry by a third of its size before the policy was introduced. So we've been able to make those choices, decide to lower our presence in markets where we think there's just not enough of a predictable runway to build a strong, sustainable business in. At the same time, once you geographically reset, which we've done a great deal of alongside localization of supply chains, we've also recognized the importance of, being even more obsessed with innovation. And I think if you look at our portfolio moves from becoming even more focused towards what we think is the trend of premiumization, Budweiser, Corona, Hoegaarden, Stella Artois, and Lef, as the brands that we're doubling down on. But equally at the same time, starting to look at where the new opportunities could come from. And that for us is the non-alcoholic beverage business, right? So you and I have spoken a great deal about that. You've done a few pieces on it as well, that suddenly you have the D2C piece coming in with all of e-commerce that I'm not allowed to access for my alcoholic products. I do have access to that for this new portfolio of offerings. And we want to continue down that path to really see ourselves evolve into a company offering many more variety of beverages than just just not the alcoholic ones. So it's a combination of trying to be that much more clearer about what you want to control, where you think the supply chains will now not fail you versus, the realities we were faced with about 18 months ago. Having a greater sense of the markets where you think you can build businesses, a portfolio that's continuously ahead of where consumer needs would go and where the trends would sort of land, and being able to then, require the right resource allocation to be put in place when it's needed, as opposed to almost like a knee-jerk reaction. So we're quite happy with how we've been able to reimagine the Indian business from where we were, 14 months out, 3 years from the combination with SAB to where we think we're getting.
Yeah, I mean, taking on from what Kartikeya was saying, it's the elephant in the room which no one ever addresses. And because it's a state mandated subject, suddenly it gets brushed under the carpet. There's a fascinating history to how it became a state mandated subject, which I will not go into right now, but excise and its contribution to the state's exchequer is staggering. And no one ever seems to speak about it. It's a lot of money that the government earns from the sale of alcohol. And the policies that are framed at the state level are bizarre sometimes. They just don't make any sense. Why, and it is another very additional and very heavy load on an F&B operator, a brick and mortar business. Let's take the example of Karnataka state itself, or take Telangana, for example, where the renewal fees are not small amounts of money. Procuring a new license is very, very expensive. And suddenly, sometimes you realize that having a license is literally the same amount of money in terms of outflow as it is on real estate rental. When you have this kind of cost structure, and of course, the procurement cost is very high as well, because it's a heavily taxed product. Now, when there's buoyancy, it's great, but what you're essentially doing is driving a very inflationary trend as far as liquor is concerned, because everything around it has become so expensive. And I think you probably know this better, but last I checked, it was nearly 23% of the state's exchequer's revenue. That's ridiculous. It's a very high amount, but it is a fact. So it's great when it's controlled by the state, etc. In retrospect, thank God it's not with the center, but at the same time, you'd want a little more rationalization over there. It needs to pan out. It needs to make sense. There can't be ad hoc policies. And when F&B establishments come under the purview of that, they become, the my lords, because everything that's dictated in terms of how you can operate. Let's take right now, for example, there's a lockdown in place. food deliveries are allowed. So I'm a restaurant, right? But I'll never be considered a restaurant because I have a liquor license attached to my to the establishment. So I am now a bar, or I am now a pub. I can never be viewed as a bona fide restaurant, and I'm very well known for the food that I do. But that becomes inconsequential because the moniker that is applied to you is that you are a bar because you have a license. Now everything then gets dictated by that particular license.
Yeah.
My ability to sell food is suddenly challenged or compromised, and you need a separate order. Then you have to do separate levels of lobbying. This all sort of ties into that, that entire paradigm that there needs to be an ease of doing business, which needs to start translating itself after things normalize, because otherwise, buoyancy or not, survival is always going to be a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, most of these issues that you just mentioned about the moniker, especially, they have been pre-pandemic issues with the industry as well, and unfortunately, not enough changes, or rather, the changes are not being done fast enough. Which also kind of brings me to the next section that I wanted to discuss, because we'll be opening up to the Q&A in the next 7 minutes. Is that tech integration, and I know that the QSR formats such as Nitin's and fine dining will have to vastly different opinion. But I'd like to start with Kartik. Like, how has the tech integration of your business changed? Has it changed in any capacity? The reason why I ask is because a few months ago, in a few markets in India, Swiggy and Zomato were allowed to deliver alcohol. Now, it's not something that the industry was happy about. Most people, in fact, I did a story where most people were not happy about. Actually, nobody was happy except the aggregators, let's be honest, and the consumers. But even now that the Karnataka lockdown has been declared, in the initial, declaration itself, there's like home delivery of alcohol is allowed. So clearly, the state is, they know that this is an industry that we can make money off of. But the tech integration has always been such a big challenge in India when it comes to whether it's delivery of alcohol or anything else in the production line, which you would know better. So, what are the tech integrations that you guys have incorporated this year? And obviously, are they likely to, what's the likelihood that these will continue to stay even post-pandemic? Over to you, Karthik.
Yeah, so last year when we saw the first wave come in and the national lockdown was lifted, but then you had these mini lockdowns that became a part of our life, particularly through July onwards till September. One of the things we were most hopeful of is that this would be that moment where most of our expectations and aspirations from India, being the next big market with, again, the demographic advantage we have, what we think would be the next wave of Indians who'd live their lives a lot more outside, would love socializing, and are becoming more and more independent, living on their own. We thought the opportunity that a lot of the state governments would look at is to really maybe not shift the 60,000 points of sale that alcohol has across a country as large as India, compared to, say, 6 million for traditional CPG, where a Coke or a Pepsi could be sold, but would look at those 60,000 points of sale more as, large servicing centers and really allow home delivery. And, while we had some early hope when you saw Zomato and Swiggy get into it as well, you had Amazon out in West Bengal that was trying out a few things. We were most hopeful because we saw the Maharashtra government that incidentally at that time as well was the most effective, that actually gave permission to home delivery. What we did really quickly, since we're one of the biggest retailers in that market as well, we have our own proprietary chain of alcohol stores called A Beer, primarily with the idea of driving more inclusive crowds in. We see more women entering our stores than many of the other retail stores that you'd find. We immediately whipped up a conduit app called the Beer Box, which effectively allows people to order. And we were the only ones at that time who were being able to service a lot of the liquor delivery, not restricted, of course, to Mumbai. Unfortunately, we couldn't go beyond that because there wasn't that kind of infrastructure available. But that really gave us hope that a lot of the other governments would look at it. We also drove a decent amount of advocacy with various governments, Karnataka included. I myself have had the opportunity of meeting a lot of the high-ranking bureaucrats and ministers, trying to make a case for why social distancing, etc., is almost intertwined in this idea of keeping people safe at the same time, not restricting their ability to go and shop. Unfortunately, even with this lockdown, what hasn't come through with clarity is how this is going to play out, because it just says 6 to 10 amongst other things. You can buy alcohol as well. Home delivery is allowed, but no one has any idea of how that's going to play out. So I do think we missed a big opportunity, to be honest. Even in West Bengal, we saw some early success with what Swiggy was doing out there. We've of course partnered with a lot of these aggregators, but you may have seen recently Zomato announcing that they're deciding to curtail whatever exploration they were planning to do in alcohol delivery, only because we know we've all sort of been engaging with the same stakeholders, trying to drive a change of mindset that India has to have a different playing field that does not involve so much control, something that I think the powers that be love. And releasing a little bit of that control will allow the businesses to flourish. You will find newer ways of doing things. And you can always have governance that still allows underage drinking to not become a reality. I can see that concern that was cited in a lot of the meetings I had as well. That Karthik, you're going to have a 12-year-old suddenly ordering a bottle of beer. Would you be responsible for that? And I think that's a fair call. You're not going to have somebody checking ID, knowing how personally affronted we get if people try to ask us for any information. But there seems to be a missed opportunity on what technology could have done overall for our business in truly expanding with the right people. The quality of products they consume. A statistic that's important that I'd like to share is with Beer Box and A-Beer, our stores, and this aggregator that connects consumers to our retail stores. Traditionally, we would have seen 80% of the sales being what we call mainstream beer. This is Hayward's and Foster's and priced beers at that. When people purchase and consume at home, the basket size shifted to over 70% of Budweiser and above price beers. People tend to buy and consume better products because the retail experience is a very suffocating one, right? These are these holes in the wall. A majority of India, it's that, with the exception of few stores here and there. And people go in, they want to just have a very transactional relationship. They just pick up the product. There's no discovery. That's why I called out the on-trade channel being such an important one for people to experience products. But the moment we saw they were sitting on an app and ordering stuff from the comfort of their homes, the quality of products they're buying is dramatically different. So we'll continue to be hopeful. We'll continue to engage with the government. But I do think there seems to be a big gap between how we tend to see what the future could be versus how the government tends to see it, which is very myopic.
It's very interesting that the basket size and the choice of beers is changing drastically when someone is ordering from home. And I mean, if I may say so from my personal experience, if I'm having liquor at home, whether it's beer or hard spirits, I'm also you want to buy better liquor when you're staying at home, because if you're inviting people over, you want to give them good liquor and good beer. You don't want to, serve the mass product that you would probably have after a hard day's worth of work. Thank you so much for that, Karthik. Nitin, I remember you and I, when we spoke, tech is a big, big, big part of your, entire business. And I remember, you mentioning how involved you guys were even with the initial patenting of your technology. At this point of time, how relevant has the technology integration been for you guys, and what are the small changes that you guys have probably integrated and are here to stay and it's part of the Chaayos ethos now from here on, if I may say so?
Shabori, as we would have talked earlier, technology is a big part of how we have built Chaayos right from day one. We've built technology to run our stores, to run our central kitchen commissaries, to be able to stay engaged with our consumers, for our consumers to be ordered in a contactless fashion at our stores. We are integrated with all the channel partners like Swiggy and Zomato, and And now this is stuff that just forms the backbone.
Yeah.
But technology at Chaayos is really how a lot of stuff gets done as well. For example, our chais are made out of chai monks. Chai monks are our IoT bots that we have patented, which brew a fresh cup of chai from ingredients. So every chai starts from milk, water, tea leaf, sugar, and masalas, and each of them is made fresh for our consumers upon their orders. What changed during the pandemic is technology allowed us to be able to become that much more transparent with our customers. For example, in April 2020, we started to print body temperature of our team members on our bills. So the moment you place an order at Chaayos, the bill that you would get in your hands, either via delivery or when you are at our stores, it will have the names of people with their body temperatures, which are taken every 2 hours. And to be able to ensure that those temperatures are being taken every 2 hours, our store cannot process a new order till the time that new body temperature has not been fed in at an interval of every 2 hours. So you bring those check and balances in place in order for technology to be able to become that much more transparent with the consumers. And I think that's.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but if I may, like, how long did it take for you guys to implement these small changes? Like, it sounds like a small thing when you say it out loud in like 5 seconds, but checking the temperature every 2 hours, like, how are you guys integrating this? How long did it take for you to implement this in your business model?
So technology idea generation, maybe 30 seconds, development of technology, maybe 7 to 10 days, making sure that it gets adhered at our stores and just getting feedback from the store and tweaking the entire backend technology, another maybe 10-15 days. So maybe 2.5 weeks, 3.5 weeks is all it took for our team to be able to go from idea to 100% execution happening at our stores. But yeah, those 3.5 weeks just allowed us to be that much more fairer and transparent in this time of extreme need for transparency with our consumers. So yeah, I think what is critical to understand is that technology is a way of life for folks at Chaayos. We proudly serve our vada paos and chais, but they are all supremely powered with the right degree of technology, just to be able to stay that much more closer to our consumers' minds.
Yeah, makes sense. Chef, you've already mentioned about the scanning of the menu, which looks like it's here to stay. But other than that, any tech advances, any tech integration that you guys have, played around with, has successfully worked for you guys, and it's here to stay?
No, mercifully not. I have a slightly more romantic notion for how cooking and processes work. I'm a hopeless romantic and a creative as far as that is concerned. But there is ample talk about robotics entering the kitchen space in a very large way. There are several companies working on it, where everything is dosed, etc. I'm sure that adds a lot of efficiencies. It works in certain models. In a model like mine, it's very difficult. In a lot of my models, because we are so prone to all kinds of constant, modifications and changes on whatever we offer, and that's a very large part of the reason why people come to us. And that's why I would say, a lot of my places aren't only about the food; they're about so much other stuff. Of course, yes. Have the DJs been replaced by Spotify? Yes, for the most part. I think that's happening everywhere. So there's definitely some level of tech there. But you'll see smaller interventions, nothing so major that it's going to disrupt the way that business functions at a fundamental level. And the reason we continue to stay in business is because we function at a fundamental level in being an overall experiential space. That's very, very hard to replace. It's still a lot more about human interaction, about ambience, about music, about a fine level of food, which you can try to automate, but it's not going to happen very easily.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the way I look at it is the whole idea of fine dining is like you want to go for the customization, you want to go for the experience. So,
yeah, I mean, it's not driving the agenda of sustenance. You're not feeling peckish and you walk into a fine dining restaurant. You dress
yeah.
up, you put your best perfume, you go
Yeah.
meet your date, you go out for your
Yeah.
anniversary.
Yeah.
You celebrate something. We do that, and
Yeah.
I mean, you may call it discretionary, but it's essential. As
It
far as I'm
is.
concerned,
Absolutely.
people need that space
Yeah.
to celebrate. You can't
Yeah.
just be cooped up at home all the time.
Yeah. On that note, I'm going to start with the Q&A. So I already have a bunch of questions which has been lined up. I'll start with, this is specifically for Nitin. This comes from Mr. Namit Singhal, and he says, thanks for the insights. And he goes on to say that, given office-going culture may remain disrupted for the near future, what different use cases are you exploring with Chaayos?
So as I mentioned earlier, about 20-25% of our business comes from business parks, and while they continue to be disrupted, we continue to rely upon the rest 75% of our network. And as we talk, starting October of 2020, we went back into expansion mode, and where we were very clearly not opening any new stores in business parks, and we were just opening stores in malls and high streets. And as and when business parks were to resume once again, we will start to expand in business parks as well. There is nothing wrong about that business or that part of business per se. Just that once consumers return, Chaayos will return there too.
Okay, cool. That's great. Thank you. Next one. This is for Kartik. The person is left their name as anonymous, so I'm just going to get right to the question. Their hypothesis is that premium beer / spirits consumption was driven by the top 20 to 30 cities of India. Your optimism also seems to be around these cities continuing to be significant target market. Do you see a significant target market beyond that as well going forward? Apart from the primary markets that you guys have already identified, do you see more markets coming up that you guys are going to target? Kartik, you're on mute.
I'm sorry about that.
No.
That incidentally is the most spoken line of 2020 from what I'm told. That is. Certainly would be my short answer. We were already seeing that before COVID. The real next wave of growth for us is coming from markets who, again, central to their core behavioral change involve living their lives outside. Yeah. Something that we call the future of socialization. It involves being more confident about yourself, being out there, supported, of course, by the idea of creating memories, social media amplification that doesn't quite look great. If we're doing this like this in our homes, looks a lot more amazing if you're at a Toast and Tonic and you're creating good memories or Chaayos. And for us, that trend was already taking place well before COVID. Yeah. If anything, when we saw the first surge retrieve and we were looking at that period of October, November, December, we were actually seeing faster recovery in those smaller cities than we were in some of the bigger cities, a case in point being Bangalore, where we're headquartered incidentally, for the reason I spoke of, because a lot of the consuming base that used to work here had gone back to their hometowns. Yeah. And, if you ask any retailer out here, I know we've been discussing more entrepreneurs who are in the F&B space, but our other trade partners who happen to be retailers, they'll all tell you that one of the reasons the total state of Karnataka may be growing by 5% versus 2019, the growth is coming from rest of Karnataka, which is North and South Karnataka. Bangalore continues to be in the range of -30 to -40 on the same comparable period because the consumer base has just vanished, right? Yeah. So we feel quite relieved that we started to almost expand our focus and distribution to the next 50 cities in India, where we would have seen growth come through, because those are the cities where most of these consuming class consumers have gone back to, and they're driving.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
There's obviously, Chef, this looks like a very heavy duty question, but what would a resilient restaurant model look like?
You tell me, it's $1 million question. If you ever find out.
The person asking the question has left an anonymous, so I don't really know how to go about this. But please, yeah, I mean, that looks like a loaded question.
Well, resilience is so subjective. And I mean, we've just covered an hour and a half about how resilience can, crack in the face of policy and adversity every time it sort of raises its ugly head. Fact is that what is an ideal restaurant is something that I could probably answer better. And that's one that focuses on quality, stays consistent, stays relevant, which is very important, I think, in today's day and age, be it through their digital presence, be it through their ability to reach out to their customer base on a constant level. There's always legacy restaurants. I will not talk about those, who could serve the same menu for 200 years and never ever go out of fashion because they are legacy restaurants for a reason. But tight costs, a good quality hierarchy always make a good restaurant tick. And I think those really are the building blocks. Your people make your restaurant invariably. So if you invest enough time and effort and energy into them, you usually have a very, very good model, resilient model. I'm sitting in a restaurant, like I mentioned earlier. We're running a delivery menu, which is not very simple. It's complex. It's been run literally by 4 people. And because they are good people who've been trained extremely well, so they can multitask, they can push out extremely high quality consistency, and there's great traction from the consumer, and the loyalties stay. So, yeah, I mean, essentially, and good rents. I'm always look towards that because those are getting kind of ridiculous.
Okay.
Shabori, can I just add to that?
Of course, please, Nitin, please.
I think we can, in closed doors, we can continue to hypothesize about anything that can help build a resilient business. The most important ingredient of a resilient food and beverage business is consumers out there, allowed to be out there at their own free will. Simple. I think Manu has built great brands. There are many others in the country who have built good to great brands. The most important ingredient right now is our consumers being allowed to step out and come back to places of their choice at their own free will. I think once that starts to happen, see, what's very, very, very clear is that people will look for their small happinesses.
Yeah.
Going to a restaurant is a happiness. Going to a cafe is a happiness. That at a very small amount, it just cheers you up. That basic fundamental human nature is just not going to change. As long as that human nature does not change, which I am fairly confident of. The only important ingredient is consumers.
Yeah. Okay. That's actually really helpful. I have about 15 minutes before I have to close this discussion, and we still have questions rolling in. But before I get back to the questions, it would be great if each of you could give me at least one key takeaway that you felt during the course of the last 15 months that has changed with the way you work as an entrepreneur, as a chef, as the head of the largest brewing company. One takeaway that you guys have learned, inculcated, and it's now part of your ethos, the way you guys work from going forward from here. And that would be great. And if we still have window, I would definitely go back to a few questions because we have quite a few questions rolling in. So we can start with the chef and then we can take it forward. Chef.
Well, I mean, I think for me, what fundamentally changed for me, and I'm very happy about it, actually, is I became exponentially more hands-on than I was over, let's say, the last 4 or 5 years, where the entrepreneurial part of it was, tending to take up a lot of my time. I sort of said, put it all aside, and I was on the range, leading by example, a tiny little team, And not only is it extremely invigorating, I think the positive impact that it has across the board through the company for all the employees was phenomenal. And I think that is something that a lot of restaurant owners today need to take cognizance of. You just can't be the guy who dad gave a lot of money to and you have to open a restaurant. You have to do more than that. You need to be hands-on in this business. You need to be passionate because so much of it is passion driven. Everything cannot be based on a formula and P's. So for me, that actually was the greatest learning and one that I'm very, very happy and proud of.
Thank you so much. Nitin?
I think if I were to count what this entire experience of 12 months has given me, it's just given me the ability to be that much more agile, to be able to. In fact, I'll pause here for a second, and I will say that the timing has been so auspicious both the years that you do your annual budgeting for the following financial year. You are all set to roll out the plans that you have for yourself, and lockdown strike. So just investing a lot of time in redoing those. So it has certainly given me good agility. It has given our team a very good solid bond, because when you tide over a difficult time like this, you tend to not forget about it and relish the person, the company by your side. So I think it has brought the entire team together that much more.
Yeah.
And certainly it has made the distinction in the consumer's mind as to what brands are serious brands that they can trust, versus which brands are lesser trustworthy. I think that's another big thing that we have learned and gained over a period of last 12-13 months. So amidst all of those not so goods, there have been some great goods.
Yeah. Kartik? You're on mute, Kartik. Kartik, you're on mute.
Couple of dogs who are getting ready for their evening walks, and there are no dog walkers now, so wanted to make sure they're not disturbing our panel discussion.
Okay.
No, I would say a couple of things very closely intertwined. Obsession with having the right people and the right people with the right mindset. I think we've been able to test quite clearly who are the ones who are resilient enough to be there in the trenches, see the business through, who are the ones who, at the first opportunity, because, there were some categories and industries that saw faster recovery, looked at jumping ship, moving out. I think you tend to see the kind of people who would really transform and drive business results would be the kinds who really have resilience baked into their DNA. They kind of do that with their teams as well. We're very proud that we've been able to sort of really home in on that core group who's shepherded us through this period over the last 12 months. At the same time, I think a big learning for me personally, having taken over the role as the head of the business here last year, has been to reevaluate where we want to do business and what are the threshold on margins we want to have while we want to operate. I think India will always be that exciting place where you could make, you could expand your business, but you wouldn't make a lot of money. I think we're very clear that there are some places in India, whether it's your portfolio, whether it's a certain geography, where I think our renewed focus on having a minimum threshold on margins that make our business sustainable, allow us to reinvest, allow us to grow, has come through as almost an important necessity if we want to think about a business that will thrive here for the next 100 years, as opposed to that having a business that just has presence, but isn't a very meaningful one because there's just not enough that you could think of reinvesting because you're just not making that much. So I would say have the right people, evaluate the parts of India where you want to do business, on the brands that you want to, build your business on. I think similar to what Nitin was saying, brands that people will continue to keep coming back to. And those brands happen to be so sustainable because they also happen to be the brands that make you enough and more that you can think of putting that much more into them. So be my 2 cents.
Thank you so much. Before I take your leave, there's one question which I find quite interesting, and it's open to all three of you. I think this is a question a lot of us would love to know and at least work towards. And and I'm assuming it'll look different for each of you. So, Chef, if you could start, how long do you think that it'll take for the industry of fine dining and experiential dining to go back to the levels we were at pre-COVID?
Between lockdown and unlock, there will be some euphoric phases, but that's not really a consistent cycle. This year, in my opinion, is largely a write-off. I don't really foresee a lot of, there will be green shoots, yes, but I don't really see a return to normalcy, quote unquote, at least this calendar year. I'm saying calendar year, not financial year. And I do hope that by the end of this year, depending on, we are a lot of people. 1.4, 1 billion people is not a small number of people to vaccinate. And that will take time. That vaccination drive essentially is what is going to drive a certain level of normalcy, especially after this wave. We were complacent in the last one. We're certainly not going to be after this one. So I'm going to bank on that essentially, because without it, I don't really see a return to normalcy in any hurry.
Okay, that sounds good. Nitin?
My best sense says 12 months. And I don't mean for the entire financial year. I mean, let's say if we were to look 12 months out, given that hoping there is no third wave, and with the amount of vaccinations that would have been done in the country by then, and relying upon the magical herd immunity, I believe that looking 12 months out, on a month-to-month basis, I think business should be very good. We've seen what high consumer confidence feels like from let's say November, December, January that just went by. That gives me enough and more confidence to just look forward to 12 months out.
That sounds good. So both of you are mentioning that this year is a write-off. It'll probably be only next year. Kartik, how about you?
Yeah, I'd maybe just answer the question more from the alcobev industry standpoint.
Yes.
I don't want to be hazarding a guess. I think both of them are in a better position to give that sort of view.
Yeah.
Before going into the second surge, our own internal modeling was suggesting Q1 or Q2 calendar year of next year of 2022.
Okay.
With what has happened with this surge and the scale and impact of it, we don't see because we keep running these models again and again. We don't see now any time before Q4 of 2022 or Q1 of 2023 being a calendar year. So next year, October, November, December to Jan, Feb, March 2023 would be the 6 month spectrum within which we'll start coming back to 2019 levels, because for us, 2019 was the last sense of normalcy. This is the pre-COVID period.
Yeah.
So whenever I talk about, what would be the starting point in the V, U, L, or K-shaped recovery, for us to go back to 2019. So like I said, this particular surge has come in hard. It's going to sustain a little longer because the number of active cases that many people seemingly suggesting would only continue to rise till the end of May. You would accordingly see the decay curve on this carry on for the better part of the ensuing months, maybe even till Q4 of this year. So we've almost just pushed the recovery out by 6 to 10 months.
Okay.
And that for us would be the estimation on when we'd see back to 2019 levels re-emerge.
Okay. That unfortunately, that is quite a long time before we reach back to those same levels. But with that, we have reached the end of our Prime Talk. Thank you so much. Thank you all the panelists. Thank you all the guests, audience who has joined us today, despite all the personal and the professional, challenges that we all deal with or have dealt with during the course of this year. I'd like to take this opportunity to just mention that ET Prime is doing a series of these talks called Prime Talk. We started last year, and it's we try and touch upon subject matters which are relevant, which people want to answer questions, like know the answers to, and a story is not enough. We need a whole room of people discussing the problem and reaching out for each other, because one of the things that all three of you touched upon was that the way you all have been dealing with your people, your employees, has changed considerably. And I guess that has changed across the globe, like the way we, empathy and compassion has arisen to a large extent. And let's hope that it continues. Thank you so much for all your time. There are a few questions which were not answered due to the lack of time. I will, they're pointedly asked to a few of you. So I will send them to you. If you guys can take 5 minutes and get the questions back, that would be great. Other than that, this recording will be available on YouTube. I'm not really sure by when. I'll find out from my tech team and I'll share it with you guys. But other than that, thank you so much. This was an absolute pleasure. I hope it was interesting for you guys as well, because it was definitely for me. And yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Shabori.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Nitin.
you, Shabori.